Hi, and welcome back to Modern World History. Today we're going to start our next unit focusing on the age of absolutism, and we're going to start this discussion by looking at the Spanish Empire. So if you remember from looking at the unit having to do with the age of exploration, the Spanish were the ones that sent conquistadors that conquered large empires in the Americas, such as the Incas and such as the Aztecs, and they were able to acquire just a huge amount of gold. We also talked about the idea of mercantilism, where each country in Europe was working very hard to get the most gold from other countries. So whoever had the most gold equaled the most wealth and most power. And so think of it in that context as we move forward here. So first I want to start with looking at Charles V. Now if you remember, when we were looking way back at the Reformation, Charles V was the Holy Roman Emperor, the same guy who tried Martin Luther as a heretic and issued the Edict of Worms and fought against the German princes who supported Protestantism. Well, Charles V actually controlled basically anything on this map here that was not anything on this map that is not blue and green. So anything that's blue and green is not part of Charles's land holdings. Everything else pretty much is, including this stuff over here in the Americas. All right, so Charles V really was truly a powerful politician during this time, just controlled huge amounts of territory. Well, Charles retired in 1556, shortly after the Protestant Reformation debacle in Germany, and he left his kingdom to two heirs, Philip his son and Ferdinand his brother. Philip inherited the Spanish Empire, so everything that's going to be in basically this here, all this over here, and probably, and I want to say also the yellow over in this way, is going to now belong to Philip II. So that's still a huge amount of territory under his control. Now, Philip II was shy, he was kind of weird and awkward, he was very, very hard-working, and he was also somewhat of a shrewd politician. There was a saying you didn't want to, what was it, they were saying that you didn't want to get, he kept his friends close and his dagger closer, or I'm sure I'm gonna, his smile and his dagger were very close. It was written by one of his historians according to the textbook. That's what I was trying to say there. So nevertheless, he was very, very, kind of almost paranoid, to the point of just being a weird, hard-working, paranoid guy. He seized the Portuguese throne once the king of Portugal died. So Portugal, he was related to the Portuguese king. He was the nephew, and so Philip II here, as you can see in the picture, became both the king of Spain and the king of Portugal. And both of these guys just had really benefited greatly, or I'd say both these countries benefited greatly during the age of exploration, in terms of wealth. So having this large empire made Philip II super rich, and he was also a devoutly Catholic monarch. And so during the time of the Reformation, he saw himself as a defender of Catholicism, and not just defending Catholicism from the Protestants, but he also defended it from the Ottomans, who were Sunni Muslims, as we learned from Unit 2. And he fought off the Ottomans with the help of some of the Italians in the Battle of Lepanto, and was successful at doing so. He also sent his armada against Elizabeth I of England in order to punish her for Protestantism. Remember, Henry VIII had established the Anglican Church, and then Mary had brought back Catholicism, and then Elizabeth brought back Protestantism again. And she also supported a Protestant uprising that had occurred in Spain. So Philip II's like, we can't stand for that. We're going to go teach her a lesson. But this really was somewhat of a demonstration that the Spanish power was starting to diminish, because the all-powerful Armada was defeated utterly by Elizabeth's navy, which this also is going to kind of establish the British as the superior and dominant naval force all the way through World War I, more or less. Now, there are also other problems ahead for Spain. Inflation was really, really high, and prices were really, really high. So what ends up happening is Spain's influx of gold causes problems. All right? So the more of something there is in the economy, the less expensive, or I guess the less it's going to cost. That's just basic supply and demand stuff. Well, when you just bring in so much gold, you actually diminish how much gold is worth. And so this caused mega inflation. The more of something there is, the less value it has. Also, there was a growing population in Spain, which led to higher demands for food. So there wasn't really enough food to support the growing population. And to make matters even worse, since Spain had so much gold, they ended up buying a lot of the gold, they ended up buying a lot of goods from France and England. Remember, we were talking about mercantilism, and the idea behind mercantilism is gold going to rivals. All right, so whoever had the most gold is going to win the game, and the British were really, really good at this. Spain was really, really bad. So even though Spain had, absorbed directly all this gold from their conquered empires, they were quickly throwing it in the way of the British and the French. And then also, the Spanish at the time controlled the Netherlands, and there was a Dutch revolt. But see, the Dutch, they didn't want to be controlled by a Spanish monarch. They also were Protestants. And so these two things here combined gave the Dutch a great motivation for trying to establish, I guess, get rid of the Spanish. And so Spain taxed them heavily, and in response they would raid Catholic churches. And so Spain retaliated, which led to about 11 years of fighting and eventually an independent and united Netherlands. And so all this rise and then kind of the fall of the Spanish political power in Europe kind of points us in the direction of what many other kings and many other monarchs were trying to do, and that is they were trying to take control of more or less everything that happened within their realm, their empire, their kingdom, whatever you wanted to call it. And the way this is going to end up looking is through the process, I guess, through this absolutism. All right, so the idea that a king's power is absolute through what they call divine right. In other words, God wants them to be king. So if God wants you to be king, I mean, who is anyone to oppose that? So just being born as the heir to the king, through divine right, God ordains me to be king, is what these kings were thinking. And so it's a justification for absolute rule. These kings could rule however they wanted to do it. What they spoke out of their very mouths would have been considered a rule. Now, we're going to learn that even the most powerful absolute monarchs still answered, at least in part, to someone. So the trick here isn't just people are going to respect you outright as an absolute. You're going to have to find ways to control those that might oppose you for power. And that's what we're going to look at when we study absolutism, in particular when we look at the French monarch, Louis XIV. All right? So kings were able to consolidate power after the Middle Ages. Part of this is because, at this point, language and culture was very well established, and also, kings were able to promise protection to everyone using the wealth they had established from colonies. So it used to be that, before, during the Middle Ages, it was a feudal society. So, when we talk about feudalism, it's like what we were just now saying in the previous unit with Japan, and you had these local warlords who would promise protection in return for military service. So this here's what Europe looked like, but then kings are now saying we're wealthy enough, we have our own armies, and we will protect everyone using that wealth. And they also were usually backed by the merchant middle class. Many of these merchants were those who had gotten involved in trade from east to west and were able to make a lot of money for themselves as well as money for the crown. The church is going to also weaken as a result of the Protestant Reformation we'd already mentioned. And this is not only because of the religious competition, but also because some of your kings, some of your nobility, they actually chose Protestantism for political purposes over Catholicism. So the Pope and the church itself is going to lose a lot of that power that they once had, simply due to the fact that people question and then won big on questioning the Catholic Church. And then also there's going to be a lot of political upheaval during this era. The next century was kind of cray. We're going to learn a lot about different wars that were fought over religion and over the competition between Bourbons and Habsburgs and this, that, and the other. So stay tuned. There's more to come on the next video of Modern World History. Thank you very much.